Okay, so Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Hi everyone, back with another episode of English Public Speaking. Today in this public speaking episode, I'm going to talk about the origins of English. Continuing from my previous public speaking of languages and language in general, today I'm going to continue to talk about one language in particular, the English language. So as you might all know, the English language is the lingua franca of the world. It's the common language that is used by a lot of people, like many people around the world. They use English to communicate to each other, pretty much because, English is everywhere. People talk in English, people already talk in English, because of the result of the British Empire invading a lot of countries in the world and all sorts of stuff. And so that made English the common language between every people in the world, and that made English the lingua franca, or the international language. And so that might make you wonder, like, where did this language originate from? Of course, like any other languages, the English language doesn't just exist. It evolves through a process, of course. It doesn't just exist. People don't just get born and talk English. No, people went through generations, and the language changed a lot by generations for each generations. So I'm going to kind of talk from the start of the English. So it all starts from the northern part of Germany, present-day Denmark, where three kingdoms lived. The Jutes at the northernmost of Denmark, the Angles at the middle, and the Saxons in the south part of Denmark. These three kingdoms lived around in 400 or 600 BC era, and they have been living there for a few years, but they've got a problem living there. They've got climate issues. They have been, farming, but it hasn't been great. They thought that the climate sucks, and they want to just migrate to another location, of which they found of the British Island, around the west of their place of Denmark. So they decided to sail out, those three kingdoms decided to sail out to the island of Great Britain. They all migrated in masses and raided the people there, and they finally replaced the language that was previously in Great Britain was Latin, because back then the Roman Empire was big. There was the golden age of the Roman Empire, and they have conquered the part of Britain. And so they replaced, after the Anglo-Saxon, those three kingdoms settled on Great Britain, they replaced the language of Latin with their own language of Anglo-Saxon. Now this is commonly known as Old English. English develops in three stages: Old English, Middle English, and Modern English that we use today. The first one is Old English, of which is the first language that is spoken on Great Britain by these Anglo-Saxon settlers. So these Anglo-Saxons people lived in peaceful for around 400 years, knowing that they could farm better compared to their previous place in northern Denmark. So they lived in peace, but before they knew it, the Normans are coming. So the Normans are the people that are living in the Normandy. Normandy is a place in northern France, on west north of France, around under the Great Britain. So like a small area. Those are the people of back then were Vikings, but they got the land because the king gave the land to them. So they made a new kind of district or some kind of small country. Not district, not country. So like Normandy. They made that place and they lived there. They adopted the French culture, the French language, and they kind of blended with the French people. They then, use French. But there's this one. So going back to English. So there's this one time where the King of Edward the Confessor, reigned in England. He was the King of England at that time, but then he died. King Edward was childless. As many monarchies, they get their next king from the sons of the king. So, for example, when a king dies, their son gets elected or gets crowned as the new king for the kingdom. But this time, King Edward doesn't have any child. So that raises some problems. So the people in England at that time got some kind of a small controversy, like who will be the next king. So after a few time, King Harold was crowned as king. He is the brother of Edward's wife. So Edward has a wife, and his wife has a brother, which is Harold. So Harold reigned in the country of England. But then there's this one person in Normandy that was really jealous of of Harold being the next king, because he thought he had a familiar relationship with Edward, so he thought he could be the next king. So he then gathered his troops of armies of Frenchmen, of Blemishmen, of Normans to sail through the English Channel to attack, to basically conquer England. They then battled face to face, Harold and William, in a battle of Hastings around in the place of Wessex. Harold was killed in action and died at that place, and William was crowned as next king of England in London. So because of that, since after the coronation of William as the new England king, because William is Norman, he doesn't speak English. He doesn't know the English language. He only knows the Norman French language, the language where he came from. So he kind of replaced all the elites in the kingdom, such as popes and all that social stuff, bishops, something like that. They replaced all the English elites with Norman ones. So the elites don't speak English anymore. They speak Norman French. That results in English being changed, being transformed. So English, because the elites use Norman French, the Old English, the people, kind of absorbed some words from the Norman French, like the words such as astonish, words such as beef, words such as purchase. These words are usually kind of deemed as more elegant to be spoken because they were spoken by the elites. So even though they have like a regular counterparts like buy, these like Norman French or like purchase sound more elegant. So that's why it may. So this is the age of where the Middle English transformed. So at this age, Middle English emerges, and now people are living in peace again, finally. So the England's people, those there, they finally can live in peace, no more wars. But before they know it, there's this one big thing that happens, the Great Vowel Shift. So the Great Vowel Shift is what made Middle English to the English that we know today. When you kind of listen to a Middle English person speak Middle English, you won't understand a thing because their pronunciation is different from Modern English. That's what the Great Vowel Shift does. The Great Vowel Shift shifts the vowels of how Middle English pronounce Middle English to be different. Somehow, I don't know. So back then in Middle English, the word bite, as in like biting a cake, was pronounced as beat. But then it changed to bite for some reason after an year. So like words like meeting as like meeting with other people. From back then it was meet, now it's meet. It's this transformation changes from the English language was previously written as how it's spoken, but then because of this Great Vowel Shift, those words became like pronounced differently, and it changed. It may cause a lot of people kind of confused, like why is English like bete pronounced as bite and when there's no a? Well, that's because of Great Vowel Shift for some reason. Now, after the Great Vowel Shift ended around 1700, finally the era of Modern English began. There's this era called the Queen Elizabeth era, where the first Queen Elizabeth was crowned as the Queen of England. In this era, the Queen Elizabeth allowed the English people, or commanded the English people to spread around the world to find new stuff, to build better ships, and to build better connections to other countries. So they then sailed through everywhere, pretty much everywhere around the world, to kind of invade everyone. As a result, they kind of transferred the English language to a lot of people, because they invaded the countries. They allowed, like India, British Raj, Indonesia also came the English people that invaded Indonesia, but then goes to Malaysia instead, and Singapore. So they built stuff like that, and those languages, they got integrated with English. So that's how English got spread around the world. And now we came to this era where the internet has boomed. So the age of internet, pretty much since internet came from the America of the United States, they use English, of course. And because of that, because internet spreads, people use internet a lot, and because they use internet a lot, they have to learn English. So English became more widespread around the world until today, that we have the English language that we know and love, that I am speaking right now. I guess that's all I could kind of say. I could kind of discuss. I could have told you guys about the origins of English. I hope you find this information or my speech useful. Thanks for listening. I'll see you later. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.